Alrighty, so I was going to start this stream today by talking about an exciting new venture that I've got going on. Um, I am going to be recording my group sessions for D&D. As you can see on screen, we've gone through a few sessions already, but I figured this would be a good opportunity to give the recap, and then should you guys watch this, we'll be all caught up once everything gets going. So, at the very beginning, basically what happened was 4 p.m. on a Thursday, middle of summer. My 3 people, 4 at the time, Mufasa, Crone, and Patricia, they are all summoned into this new world called Spira. A lot of the things that are going on, they are very Final Fantasy inspired. So a lot of things that are going on are going to be Final Fantasy based, regardless if it's 10, 15, 7. But once they're summoned in, they wake up. They have absolutely nothing on them, not even the clothes that they did. A Moogle comes up and greets them to begin their tale. And they woke up outside of a very desolate area. The Moogle explains to them that it is a city inside of a wasteland called Midgar. The Moogle showed them the way into an area that he says is called the Fifth Gate Slums. The people in the slums are not wealthy in any possible way. Most of the houses in at least the 5th area slums can't really hardly even be called houses. It's more like dwellings. Most of the areas are destroyed, and most of the doors are basically just kind of cloth coverings. But in the center of the areas, there is a massive elevator that leads up to an area called the slum dwellers call the Plate. The Plate is basically where those who have attained enough money to live somewhat comfortably live. So it's not a real good dynamic for poor versus rich, but well, that's sometimes how things are. They ended up meeting a man who told them to just call him the Magister. He is the one who summoned them. He is the one who sent Mog to retrieve them. While they were talking to them, Mufasa, who is a Leonin, so he is a lion beast man, he ended up finding an egg, which when handed to Crone, who is a just basic human, the egg, once Crone touched it and held it, started wiggling about. And then Patricia, she is a Kalashtar, which, for lack of or I guess rather, in order to make this a little bit faster, she is a Kalashtar, which to an extent is kind of like an elf. Just to give you a basic, this is what they look like. And then upon talking to the Magister and such, the Magister was curious about why the egg responded to one and not another, so the egg was given to Crone by the Magister to hold on to, see what happens. They were also given food vouchers for the cafeteria inside this area, and then Mog led them to the dining area. Mog is, of course, the Moogle, all of the Moogles' names in most of the games are pretty close to what it's all a variation of the word Moogle, so not a whole lot of creativity there, but it works. That's how their race is. And then whenever they hit the dining hall, they met Varric, who is the general of the guard. They talked about a few things, how to get prepared, how to, get their ranks up and such. They were given for lack of a better word, a tablet that will show them their rank, their ID. It's basically a glorified ID, but it gives them all of their missions and the like. And then after explaining all of that, he took them to the armory so they could get set up with basic equipment. While they were in the armory, at this point it was the next day, Friday the 8th, 39th of summer. They found out that there was a new traveler. Well, she woke up before the rest of them. She was a little bit more... She's a lot easier to wake, I guess. And then she ended up joining the group. Her name was Intros, and I believe she was a human as well. I'll have to double check whenever the group comes back. They were instructed on how to use their tablets and stuff for a second time, just in case. We're not able to meet regularly, so recaps are kind of how we get back into the run of things. They are currently rank G. The highest rank is triple S, so they've got a ways to go. It goes from G up the alphabet to A, and then S, SS, and triple S. And their first mission that they found, received on their tablet, was for gathering mushrooms just outside of town. As you would imagine, lower rank missions are less dangerous typically, and could even just include fetch quests, which this one was clearly a fetch quest. They did find their way, but on the way back they ran into a few hyenas, which good rolls on their part and very poor rolls on mine, so the hyenas were subdued rather quickly. They were shown how to get to the commissions area, and then they received their rewards. All commissions besides specialty commissions, which they may encounter later, are through a specified commissions area, which also has it's basically your shopping area. That's where your armory is. That's where all of your general store and potion maker and then of course they went back to the mess hall at roughly 1 p.m. They ended that session. Starting back up, they just started back up where they left off at the dining hall, Friday, 1 p.m., still the 39th of summer. After eating, Crone did his rest, waiting for quests. Patricia and Intros ended up going to a training hall. While they were training, they received 2 quest updates and went and grabbed Crone, who did not wake up from the alerts. Heavy sleeper, apparently. And the quests were both G rank. One was to explore a cave, and one was to find a wild boar that was kind of messing up some of the terrain, starting to mess with some of the wildlife. So again, pretty basic little entrance level things. They started with the cave, and they had a few issues with the darkness of the cave. They ended up wading through some waters that had some quippers, which in D&D, quippers, if you know anything about D&D, then you may not need me explaining. But just in case you would like a little bit more explanation on some of the monsters and such, quippers are basically piranha. So, little things like blood. After they fought the quippers, they were not doing so great. There were quite a few quippers, and they were not very well prepared for water. So they rested a little bit, and they went to find the boar. Crone ended up befriending the boar by using a animal friendship spell on it, which is exactly what it sounds like. And don't quite remember why, but he had the boar follow Patricia. I think Patricia just kind of wanted a pet. And then they went to turn in the quests. The quest lady, the commissions lady, she wasn't 100% sure if she should give them the rewards, since they didn't necessarily get rid of the boar, but with it not being in the area that they were messing up, she decided that it was fine and passed the quest. And they ended that session at about 7 p.m. in-game. So they re-explored the cave. They were a bit more prepared for the quippers this time. Fortunately for them, they actually ended up killing all of them, so I didn't have to worry about setting up a battle there. But they did find a sign that said danger. Of course, being the masochistic type, Crone convinced them to keep going. They came into a hallway that had a bunch of pitfalls. All of those basic Skyrim type, there's the guillotine, there's, those kinds of traps. Along the way, though, Piggy was dropped inside one of the pitfalls because it was unable to make the jump. They also decided that their characters hadn't slept in a while. It was a good idea to sleep. And with all the pitfalls, there would have been little risk of being attacked. It was a very cramped and small room that they slept in, filled with all kinds of alchemy equipment, books of all different kinds. They didn't really find a whole lot that was special, except for Crone did find a book on, though not in a language he could understand, he was able to discern that it was a book on how to gain wings. he doesn't know much more about it at the moment. They woke up about 6 a.m. And then they left the cave. Mufasa was gone for a while. His character wasn't able to play as he had prior engagements, but this round he was able to show up. After they came back with Mufasa, they actually ended up getting 2 more quests. There was a G quest to hunt down some Pharaoh Mastiffs, and an F rank quest to hunt down some crocodiles. Of course, they chose the, for lack of a better word, easier quest, the lower rank quest, to fight the Mastiffs, and they headed over to the bounty. There were a few more than they thought there would be. 2 of the Mastiffs ended up fleeing, but they were real close to dead. The rolls were not in their favor that night. They weren't necessarily in mine either, but regardless, they ended up heading back so that they could rest again. And I had decided that the egg would hatch during breakfast as they leveled up that night. They became level 2. So that's a very positive thing on their end. Of course, that means that some of their quests would be a little bit harder later on. Obviously, whenever you rank up, you want to fight stronger things. However, on the next session, mainly Crone, he's the quote-unquote leader of the group. They've basically, at this point, just kind of done what he's thought up. Which is fine. He hasn't necessarily gotten them killed yet, so. However, it did throw me off that they skipped breakfast, which is when I was going to have the egg hatch. So I had to play with that one a little bit on the spot. And instead of going to breakfast, they hit on their quest for the crocodiles. Whenever they got to the one river in this wasteland, they realized that the river had no fish for some reason. And they also found a hut that was, it could be said that it was pristine and destroyed at the same time. Meaning the parts that were there were in immaculate condition. However, there were still all kinds of holes and missing door, and half of the roof was gone. But it didn't look like that anything was actually destroyed. With how good condition all of the wood and everything was, it almost looked like it was built that way. Anyway, they ended up kind of hunkering down there for a minute so that they could see if the crocodiles would show up. And during that time, the egg decided to hatch, and it became a creature known as a chocobo, which in the Final Fantasy games, the baby chocobo, I decided to make the Final Fantasy 15 style chocobo. So it's basically just a little orb about yay big. Clearly it's, you can tell the difference between its head and everything, like a chicken. But probably about yay or so big. So the egg wasn't the smallest thing. But the chocobo came in very quick help to them. as it, just in its play, ended up finding a hidden staircase that was not exactly pure black, but it was not necessarily magical. Regardless, the light didn't shine on the walls or the flooring or the ceiling. It only shined through the area. So as all of that was happening, they were walking and walking and walking, endless loop type thing, and they decided to have Patricia shoot some fire bolts down the way. As it is a cantrip, it wouldn't risk much. But oh, I see I've got a few viewers I haven't even looked over yet. How are we all doing? We liking the story so far, or did we just join? Anyway, she shot a firebolt straight through, and turned out that it came not just back, but it shot down from the ceiling in front of her feet. Fortunately, she did roll a miss at that point. Yes, missing can be helpful. And as they were going about that, they finally decided to turn around, and they saw a light. Whenever they went through that light, however, they wandered into an area that looked the same, but they discerned that it felt a lot more like a simulation. Just kind of in the way that it all felt fake. They ended up turning back, and again, they shot projectiles trying to figure out what was going on there. But they eventually just turned around, saw a light, and got back to the original area. It was a lot later in the day, though. So there was a bit of a time difference in the two areas. They came back up pretty close to probably about 10 p.m. And they didn't get there until, they got there at about like 2 p.m. So the time difference was heavy. Anyway, they rested in the hut and they woke up in the morning. Typical wake up time for something like that. So it was about 6 o'clock-ish. However, when they woke up, there were a lot of animals rearing about. All different kinds, lots of stuff going on. Of course, it is a river, and it's wake up time, so all the animals need to get a drink. Just kind of how nature follows its pathing. As they were walking across the river, they did find a couple crocodiles. And upon sight, Crone ended up shooting his bow at one of them. Of course, most of the other animals in the area fled. The crocodiles decided that they weren't going to have any of it. So the crocs fought. They were able to subdue both of the crocodiles. And after doing a bit of looting, they returned back home. But on the way home, they had a hallucination about a creature that I'm calling the Collective. If you've seen RE0, it's basically the White Rabbit. In this hallucination, there was, and mind you, the area they were in at the time was a complete wasteland. during the hallucination, they saw a bunch of kind of grayish snow falling down, and they immediately thought that it was ash, so they figured something was on fire. It was a good guess, but it was just a hallucinatory snow. And as the snow was falling, once it thickened, they saw these little white puffs with deep red eyes poking out, and they went along for another maybe 30 seconds, and in front of them popped up a massive version, like colossal height of the same creature. And no sooner did that one pop up, the entire hallucination vanished, and they were at the entrance to the 5th area slums. And whenever they were talking about it in the dining hall, Varric popped up, and they learned that Varric has heard about this bunny. It seems to be a legend around here. Something that many have talked about, but no one has truly ever encountered. And then they went back and met back up with Magnus again as to show him about the chocobo and ask about the hallucination. They forgot to ask him about the hallucination, however, but they did show him about the chocobo, and he started going off on a tangent about how the chocobo, while it is not a necessarily rare animal, there are certain mutations for the chocobos that have happened in the past that were known as rare, even legendary. So the magistrate gave Crone a book about the legends of chocobo mutations, and you are now caught up as to where the group is at the moment. So now that you're caught up, the next session that pops up, whenever that may be, you will know a rough of what's going on, and then you'll be able to see my people and learn who's which character and be a part of the action. So thank you for listening to my story thus far, and we will continue this story in the future. But as for now,